and it all started with a simple question. Are you my mom's boss? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A young black boy, no more than 7 years old, stepped out into the towering glass lobby of Halcyon Innovations. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt, khakis that looked a size too big, and held a worn leather briefcase almost as large as his chest. His shoes didn't match, but his posture was straight, and his eyes, large, steady, and unafraid, scanned the expanse of polished marble with the calm of someone who had made up his mind. He had come with a message, and a question that would change everything. Okay, Jordan, he whispered to himself, pressing one hand over his heart, just like Mama said, chin up, eyes forward. Halcyon's headquarters sparkled in the morning sun, a steel-and-glass fortress of ambition nestled in downtown Chicago. Executives in $1,000 suits flowed past him, barely noticing. But Jordan was on a mission, and that mission led him to the front desk, where he had to tiptoe just to see over the counter. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Miss Camille Barrington." The receptionist blinked in confusion. "Sweetheart, are you lost? Where's your mom or dad?" Jordan took a breath, just as he had practiced. "My mom's name is Mariah Davis. She had an interview today for the project manager position, but she's in the hospital. I'm here to take her place." The woman froze mid-keystroke. "She had trouble breathing last night," he continued, voice trembling only slightly. "They rushed her to Northwestern, but she stayed up all night working on her presentation. It's all in here." He placed the briefcase on the counter with both hands, then stepped back proudly. At that moment, a tall woman with sleek gray hair, sharp eyes, and the quiet force of leadership paused nearby. She wore no makeup, didn't need any, and her posture was perfect. This was Camille Barrington, Halcyon's legendary CEO. Her name was synonymous with precision, progress, and impossible standards. She was known for never making exceptions. "What's going on, Diane?" Her low voice cut through the lobby. The receptionist stood, flustered. "This boy says he's here for his mother's interview." Camille turned, one brow raised, eyes narrowing as she examined the boy. His tie was crooked, his hands were shaking, but his gaze didn't flinch. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jordan Davis, ma'am." "And your mother is Mariah Davis?" "Yes. She has 8 years of experience managing tech rollouts, a PMP certification, and an MBA from Northwestern. She really wanted to work here. She said your company actually helps people." Camille's expression flickered. A pause. Then, "Follow me." The room fell silent as she led him toward the executive elevator. Nobody questioned her. Nobody dared. Inside the elevator, Jordan glanced up. "Ma'am, I'm not allowed to drink coffee yet, but if you need it, I know how to make it just right." For the first time in years, Camille Barrington let out an unguarded laugh. When they entered her office, sunlight flooding in over a ward's glossy conference tables and framed articles from Forbes, Jordan walked straight to a chair and opened the briefcase. "These are her reports," he explained, "and the PowerPoint she finished before she got sick. She also wrote a cover letter. I read it twice." Camille sat across from him, studying the documents. They were meticulous, efficient, filled with numbers that mattered. She could tell immediately Mariah Davis wasn't just competent, she was exceptional. "Who's taking care of you right now, Jordan?" "My neighbor, Mrs. Hill, but she's really old. I packed my own lunch this morning. It's peanut butter. Mom says protein helps your brain think better." "And your dad?" "Pops left when I was a baby. Mom says he wasn't ready to be a dad yet." He shrugged. "It's just us, but we're a really good team." Camille was silent. Something in his voice, his calm, his strength unlocked something buried deep in her chest. Memories of nights spent alone in graduate housing. Years clawing up the corporate ladder. A daughter she barely saw because the grind never paused. Then suddenly she stood. "Janet," she said into the intercom, "cancel my morning board meeting and find out who's treating Mariah Davis at Northwestern." Pause. "Ma'am, you have a quarterly review with the board." "Reschedule it." Jordan's eyes widened. "Are you going to see my mom?" "Yes," Camille replied, I need to meet the woman who raised someone like you." As they descended together in silence, Jordan looked up one more time. "Mrs. Barrington, why are you helping us?" She didn't answer right away, but when she did, her voice was quieter than usual. "Because sometimes life puts the right person in front of you at exactly the wrong time, and it wakes you up." Jordan once said something that stayed with Camille for days. He had looked her in the eye and said, "Busy people, important ones, they usually don't have time for others." That simple observation struck deeper than it should have. Why was that true? Camille Barrington had built Halcyon Innovations on precision, results, and ambition, not compassion. And yet somehow this 7-year-old had broken through the iron wall even her board couldn't crack. "You've done something most of my executives haven't," she admitted. "You've got my full attention." Jordan beamed, revealing a wide grin with a missing front tooth. Without hesitation he reached for her hand. That small, innocent gesture stunned her. It was trust, unfiltered. What neither of them knew was that this, right here, was the first step toward healing the invisible wounds they shared. Northwestern Memorial Hospital was buzzing with life. Gurneys zipped by, nurses called names, machines beeped rhythmically. Camille, elegant in her steel-gray suit, looked out of place among the paramedics and visitors, but she walked with the same authority that dominated boardrooms. "Room 317, the nurse at the desk said after checking the monitor. "But visiting hours don't begin until—" Camille slipped her business card across the counter. "This is urgent. Tell her it's corporate." Jordan took the lead, moving through the hallways like he'd done it before. And that's what stunned Camille most, how comfortable he looked navigating a place no child should be familiar with. How many times had this boy walked hospital corridors alone? When they entered the room, Mariah Davis sat propped up in bed. Her hair was tied back into a messy ponytail. A line trailed from her arm to an IV bag. Her skin was pale, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, but even in sickness there was a quiet strength about her. "Jordan," she rasped, "what are you doing here? I thought you were with Mrs. Hill." Her eyes widened when she saw Camille step forward. "Oh my God." Jordan smiled. "Mom, this is Miss Barrington. I went to your interview. She brought me here to see you." Mariah flushed with panic. "What did you do?" Camille spoke gently. "Your son made quite the impression. He presented your resume with remarkable poise. He earned my respect." Mariah attempted to sit up straighter. I'm so sorry, Jordan. We talked about this. Mrs. Hill was supposed to call the company to reschedule." "But you worked so hard on the presentation," Jordan interrupted, his voice cracking. "And we really need this job." The honesty in his voice silenced the room. Camille pulled a chair beside the bed. "Your son mentioned you worked at Westlake?" Mariah nodded, still confused. "Yes, 5 years. Then it was sold and downsized." "Your portfolio's impressive," Camille said. "Why hasn't another company hired you?" Mariah looked at her son, then back at Camille. "It's complicated. I'm a single mother without family support. Most companies won't say it outright, but they see me as a risk. They wonder who'll cover for me if Jordan gets sick. 8 interviews in 2 months. 8 rejections." Camille said nothing as Jordan quietly climbed into the bed beside his mother and checked her IV line, instinctively, like it was something he had done many times before. "The medical bills are drowning us," Mariah admitted. "Pneumonia came at the worst possible time." A buried memory rose in Camille's mind. Another woman, also alone, also fighting the world with no safety net. Camille's decision was instant. "When can you return to work?" "The doctor says I can be discharged tomorrow. I'll need about a week to fully recover." "Then let's schedule an official interview for Monday." She reached into her jacket, handed over a card. "Ask the hospital billing department to contact this number." Mariah stared at the card, stunned. "Ms. Barrington, that's not necessary." "It is," Camille replied. "At Halcyon we care about our people." As they left, Jordan turned to her and whispered, "Thank you for helping my mom." For reasons she couldn't explain, his gratitude meant more than any multi-million-dollar merger she'd signed. Over the next 5 days, Jordan became a kind of unofficial presence at Halcyon. With Mariah's hesitant permission and under proper supervision, Camille arranged a private driver and a quiet corner office across from her own. Jordan did his homework there in the afternoons, occasionally offering unsolicited opinions on everything from cafeteria menus to marketing slogans. On Wednesday, Camille dropped by and found him hunched over a math worksheet. He looked up, thoughtful. "I think Halcyon's operating margins could improve if you reorganized the supply chain," to explain to Faye. She blinked. "Excuse me?" He shrugged. "Mom talks through her work with me. She says explaining things out loud helps her think. Also, Diane gave me a business magazine when I got bored." Camille leaned on the doorframe, amused. "Most kids your age read comic books." "I read those too. Batman's my favorite," Jordan said seriously. "He helps people. And he doesn't even have superpowers." Camille laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. He was already more pragmatic than half her executive team. By Thursday, the entire office had noticed the shift. Janet, Camille's assistant for 15 years, watched closely as her boss checked the clock before Jordan's usual arrival. "She reminds me of someone," Janet said, setting the budget report on Camille's desk. "She's just a kid with potential," Camille replied, tone clipped. "If you say so." Janet raised an eyebrow. She had known Camille long enough to recognize the distant look in her eyes. Something resembling vulnerability. "The board's asking about your canceled meetings. Damai can forward their questions to me," Camille said coolly. Later that afternoon, she found Jordan in the break room, charming the marketing team with his ideas about packaging colors and slogans. They weren't humoring him, they were taking notes. Camille stood at the door for a moment, watching this boy, 7 years old, half orphaned by abandonment, half raised by necessity, captivate her team like a born leader. Something inside her shifted again. Not just admiration, not just guilt, with a cult vision of purpose. Jordan leaned over a conference table where marketing samples were laid out in color-coded folders. "The green's too pale. Kids at my school like brighter colors." The director of marketing, halfway through a croissant, raised an eyebrow and began scribbling notes. Just then, Camille's voice gently cut through the room. "Mr. Davis," she said with a smirk, "I believe it's time for your check-in." This had become their quiet ritual, each afternoon spent reviewing Mariah's health updates and discussing what Jordan had absorbed that day from Halcyon's fast-paced operations. Inside her office, Jordan took his usual seat, legs swinging off the leather chair. "The nurse says Mom's lungs are much better. I get to go home with her tomorrow." "That's the best news I've heard all week," Camille said, sliding a glass of chocolate milk across the table, another part of their now unspoken routine. Then Jordan looked down at the drink, his voice suddenly more serious. "Will you still want to see me once Mom starts work?" Camille blinked. "Why wouldn't I?" Jordan shrugged, eyes fixed on the milk's rim. "My dad, he stopped coming around after I turned 4. Sometimes people just stop wanting kids around." The words cut deeper than any boardroom betrayal. Camille had faced market collapses, public scrutiny, the bitter sting of personal loss, but nothing had prepared her for the brutal honesty of a child with too much life experience for his age. "Jordan," she said softly, choosing her words carefully, "some people leave because they don't know how to stay. That's not your fault. It never was." She hadn't planned to revisit the past that day, but something in his voice unlatched the drawer of her heart and her desk. She pulled out a silver photo frame, brushed her thumb over it, and placed it in front of him. "This is Lily," she said, "my daughter." Jordan leaned in, studying the girl's wide smile and Camille's unmistakable eyes. "Where is she now?" he asked. Camille looked out the window, her voice lowered. "She and her mom died a long time ago, in a car crash." Jordan nodded slowly. "Is that why you sometimes look sad when you see me?" The question floated in the air like glass, clear, dangerous, and too honest to escape. Camille's throat tightened. "No," she whispered. You remind me that I still have something left to give. The next morning, Camille stood behind her desk, facing Victoria Sloan, Halcyon's head of HR. Victoria's arms were crossed, her expression sharp. I've reviewed Mariah Davis's file. Her experience is solid, but the risks are significant. Camille raised an eyebrow. Go on. She's a single mother, no support system, recovering from illness. She's taken emergency leave multiple times in past roles to care for her son. Statistically, the risk of attendance disruption is high. Camille set her pen down slowly. Did you evaluate her performance? She exceeds expectations consistently, but frankly, we have other qualified candidates. Less complicated ones. Are they as good? Camille's voice cooled. Victoria hesitated. They're reliable. Camille leaned forward, her gaze sharp. A brilliant woman raising an extraordinary son while managing projects that save companies millions. That's not a liability. That's leadership. Victoria shifted. Camille, this isn't like you. The board's already raising questions. They're rumors. I don't deal in rumors, Camille said flatly. I deal in results. Mariah's strategy saved Westlake over $3 million last year. That's the only metric that matters. Later that afternoon, James Whitfield, Halcyon's CFO and Camille's oldest friend, closed the office door behind him with deliberate calm. Camille, he said, his voice more personal than professional, we need to talk. About Mariah Davis. If this is about her qualification. It's not, he interrupted. It's about you. Camille narrowed her eyes. I've known you for 30 years, James continued. Since Caroline, since Lily. And I've never seen you like this. She said nothing. You've built walls so high the board calls you the machine when you're not around. Then a kid walks into your lobby and suddenly you're canceling investor meetings and paying hospital bills. What's your point? James leaned in. Be careful. Not just at work, in here, he tapped his chest. If this is about a second chance, it's beautiful. But if you're chasing ghosts... Camille stared out at the skyline. Do you know Jordan packs his own lunch? Since he was 5. He knows how to manage a medication schedule. He's 7, James. James's voice softened. And Lily would be 19 this year. The silence between them said what neither could. After James left, Camille opened the drawer again. Her finger brushed over the silver frame. Carolyn's smile frozen in time, Lily curled in her lap. Forever, too. What do you think? She asked the photo. Is this a ghost? Or is this what it looks like to finally do the right thing? The picture gave no answer, just the soft ache of memory. Then the intercom buzzed. Mrs. Barrington, Mariah Davis is here. She was discharged this morning and asked to see you. Camille slid the frame gently back into the drawer. Whatever happened next would either confirm the board's fears or mark the start of something different. Mariah stood in Camille's office doorway, nervous but composed. She wore a modest navy suit, dated but clean and pressed. Mrs. Barrington, she began, her voice firm despite the fatigue in her face, I'm here to thank you. For what you did for Jordan, for paying my hospital bills. I didn't ask for that. Camille stood, gesturing for her to come in. You didn't have to. I'll arrange a repayment plan, Mariah said quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Camille gestured to the seat across from her. No need. Think of it as an investment. Mariah sat down, her posture perfect despite the discomfort in her expression. Investments are only made when you expect a return, Ms. Barrington. I haven't proved I'm worth it yet. You haven't had to, Camille replied with a rare softness. Your son is already a remarkable ambassador. The marketing team is revising their campaign based on his color suggestions, and the break room now stocks chocolate milk thanks to him. A surprised smile touched Mariah's face. Brief, but real. He has a way of connecting with people. Clearly, Camille said, but I know you didn't intend for him to show up here alone. You don't owe me an apology. We're both here now, and sometimes the most important opportunities come from broken protocols. Mariah's smile faded into something more serious. Camille leaned forward slightly. Your formal interview is set for Monday, but today I'd like to discuss something else. Mariah tensed. Of course. Camille didn't soften the question. Why do you keep pursuing corporate roles when companies keep turning you down because of your family situation? The question hung between them, heavy and exposed. Mariah's eyes flared. Hurt first, then steel. Because I don't want my son to grow up thinking that motherhood makes me less valuable. Because I'm exceptional at what I do, regardless of what happens in my personal life. She straightened in her chair. And frankly, I'm not chasing ping-pong tables or office culture. I need reliable health insurance, stability, practicality. Camille nodded slowly. I respect that. And if I'm hired, Mariah continued, I'll handle emergencies the same way I always have, with backup systems. Her voice didn't waver. I've built a network of 3 babysitters, 2 after-school programs, and a group of working parents I rotate with. I run my life like a project plan, with contingencies, redundancies, and protocols. She leaned forward now. I know what employers worry about. I've lived it. But here's what they don't know. Single parents are often the most productive people you'll ever meet. We don't gossip. We don't waste time. We optimize everything. Because we have to. Camille sat back, stunned. Not by what Mariah said, but by the truth of it. And then, without ceremony, she slid a folder across the desk. This outlines a new pilot program. I'd like you to be its first participant. Mariah blinked. What is it? Flexible work schedules, emergency childcare support, systems designed for employees with family responsibilities. She flipped through the document, trying to take it all in. You created this for me? No, Camille said softly. I created this 17 years too late. She looked straight at her. When my wife, Caroline, tried to return to work after Lily was born, every company, including mine, saw her as complicated, not brilliant. I was so busy building Halcyon that I didn't see how the system failed her. She paused. The truth hung uncomfortably between them. What happened? Mariah asked, her voice gentle. Camille's eyes darkened with old grief. She was driving to another interview when a semi-truck crossed the divider, killed instantly. Lily, too. She took a breath, steadying herself. Jordan reminds me of who Lily might have become. Before understanding dawned in Mariah's eyes. That's why you helped us. Maybe that's how it started, Camille admitted. But your qualifications stand on their own. Your son, he just helped remind me of what truly matters. She extended her hand across the table. This position is yours if you want it. Mariah reached out slowly, grasping the offered hand. And in that moment, neither woman could have predicted how this one decision would ripple outward, not only changing their lives, but reshaping the future for hundreds of working parents at Halcyon Innovations. Because sometimes it takes a child to reopen a closed heart. And sometimes leadership means rewriting the rules. 2 months later, it started quietly, almost imperceptibly, but the ripple effects were real. 2 months after Mariah Davis joined Halcyon Innovations, the culture had begun to shift. Her sharp mind and methodical approach brought immediate results. Processes ran smoother. Meetings got shorter. Deadlines were no longer aspirational. They were met. The flexible work pilot program, which began as an exception, now included 5 more employees. Camille gave it a name, the Family Forward Initiative. At the quarterly board meeting, Mariah stood confidently at the head of the table, presenting cold, hard data. Productivity up 12%, employee retention climbing, and sick leave usage on the decline. Her presence was commanding, her slides clear, and her voice firm. Even Victoria Sloan, the once skeptical head of HR, took notes, though she added pointedly, "It's only been 2 months. What happens when the novelty wears off?" Mariah didn't flinch. That's why we track performance weekly, not quarterly. We solve problems before they snowball. Camille sat at the far end of the table, watching it all with a quiet pride. Mariah hadn't just met expectations. She'd rewritten them. When the room grew silent, Camille stood. This initiative is no longer an experiment, it's part of who we are. Mariah, expand it to 15 more roles next quarter. That afternoon, Camille found Jordan seated at his usual table in the corner of Mariah's office, diligently finishing a science project. What had once been controversial, allowing employees' children in designated areas, was now quietly normalized. "Mr. Barrington," Jordan said without looking up, "Mom's helping Mr. Davidson solve the supply chain issue, just like I told you." Camille chuckled. "So I've heard." She was pretty impressed. "She's always been like that," Jordan replied, matter of fact. "People just didn't notice before." That single line hit Camille like a thunderclap. How many brilliant minds had been overlooked because they didn't fit the mold? Camille pulled up a chair beside him. "How'd you feel about helping me with a special project?" Jordan's eyes lit up. "What kind of project?" "I'm thinking about creating a space here for kids whose parents have to work late. A place for homework, creativity, and maybe snacks." Jordan leaned in, already thinking. "It needs books at every reading level, quiet spaces and group spaces, not just cookies, some healthy snacks too, though cookies are still important." Camille pulled out her notebook, jotting down every word. "What about school breaks?" "For sure," Jordan nodded. "You could have college students come help with homework, and maybe a telescope for stargazing nights." For the next hour, the CEO and the 7-year-old built the foundation of what would become Halcyon's Bridging Futures program, an on-site child enrichment space that would later revolutionize work-life balance in American corporations. That evening, Mariah walked into her office to find Camille and Jordan surrounded by sketches, post-it notes, and crayon-marked diagrams. "Should I be worried about this conspiracy?" she teased. "Mom," Jordan beamed, "we're designing a kid zone for Halcyon." Mariah raised an eyebrow. "Sounds expensive." Camille smiled. "No, it's an investment, one that'll pay dividends for generations." As they walked toward the elevator together, Mariah glanced at Camille. "You've changed," she said. Camille raised an eyebrow. "Better or worse?" Mariah didn't hesitate. "Definitely better. People don't call you the machine anymore." Camille blinked. "You heard about that?" "Rumors move fast in a company," Mariah laughed. "These days, they're calling you a revolutionary." As the elevator doors slid shut, Camille allowed herself a rare smile. Sometimes revolutions don't begin with speeches or memos, but with a child asking, "Well, can't things be different?" But change never comes without opposition. What no one at Halcyon realized was that this quiet cultural revolution hadn't gone unnoticed by those who benefited from the old ways, and they were preparing to push back. At the next board meeting, things began like any other: financial statements, forecasts, strategic plans. James Whitfield presented the numbers calmly. "Revenue is up 7% year over year. Departments involved in the Family Forward initiative show a 22% boost in productivity." Several board members nodded in approval. But then Gerald Harrington, the board's elder statesman and former CEO, cleared his throat. "While the numbers are impressive," he said, his voice gravelly with 30 years of tradition, "I'm hearing concerns about culture." Camille didn't move. "There's a perception," he continued, "that Halcyon is becoming more of a daycare facility than a financial powerhouse." She waited. "Children in the workplace, flexible schedules, remote work accommodations. These things appeal to a certain demographic, yes, but our core clients value structure, order, and tradition." Camille finally looked up, her gaze cool, steady. "Then maybe tradition needs to catch up." Morgan Stanley may ban drinks with straws, but at Halcyon the concerns ran deeper. Victoria Sloan, calm but pointed, noted recent complaints from senior staff about noise and disruptions. "Just yesterday," she said, "a junior analyst had been spotted tossing a foam football with a child in the east hallway." "That was my son," Camille Bertin replied quietly. "The game was a multiplication exercise I created to help him learn faster." The room fell silent. Camille could feel it, the quiet resistance, the veiled accusations cloaked as protocol. Alex Harrington, the board's elder statesman, leaned forward, his tone soft but deliberate. No one questioned Camille's authority, he said, but people were talking. About her judgment. About her attachment to the Davis family. About whether personal emotion was now interfering with professional objectivity. Camille felt the old chill wrap around her again. The corporate armor she wore for decades before Jordan and Mariah had stepped into her life. My personal investments are irrelevant, she said, steady and composed. The numbers speak for themselves. If our goal is shareholder value, this initiative has already succeeded. The tension in the room eased, but Camille knew what this was, a warning shot. After the meeting, James caught up with her. That wasn't just Gerald. Victoria's keeping records of every child incident, every deadline extended due to schedule shifts. Camille answered calmly, "Let her. The data supports what we're doing." But James wasn't done. It's not just about data. It's perception. Gerald still influences the older board members. They see these changes as a rejection of everything they built. Camille gathered her notes. Then maybe it's time that company grew up. That evening, instead of returning to her glass penthouse in the city, Camille drove to Lincoln Park. Mariah had invited her to dinner. Nothing formal, just a small thank you for guiding Jordan. The house was modest but warm. Books covered the table, a science project volcano bubbled on the counter, and framed children's artwork lined the hallway. Jordan opened the door wearing an oversized apron and grinned. "I made lasagna." Camille smiled in spite of herself. "I'll definitely come to the science fair," she said when he proudly showed off his erupting volcano. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily, from Jordan's school antics to Halcyon's restructuring. It was one of the few moments in recent memory when Camille didn't have to calculate her tone or measure her words. After Jordan finished his homework, Mariah looked over at Camille and said, "You're different now, more human." Camille paused. "I spent decades building a professional persona. It became habit. It became armor." Mariah nodded. "I recognize it." "I wore the same armor. Being a single mom in corporate America, you don't survive without one." Camille felt both exposed and understood. "The board's pushing back," she admitted. "They're using you and Jordan to say I've lost my objectivity." Mariah's face tensed. "I can step away from the initiative. Request a transfer." Camille shook her head. "No, that would prove them right. We move forward." What she couldn't admit, not even to herself, was that the thought of losing them, of returning to the cold isolation that had once defined her life, felt worse than losing her legacy. She looked at Mariah and said quietly, "Be prepared, corporate politics can get ugly." Mariah smiled, not unkindly. "Miss Barrington, I've raised a child alone for 7 years. Nothing a boardroom throws at me will ever match that." Later that night, as Camille drove home, she realized she had shared more with Mariah than she had with anyone else on her executive team. And what shook her even more was that the fear of losing her reputation, once the thing she guarded most, felt trivial now, compared to losing the quiet connection she'd built with Mariah and Jordan. The next morning, Janet entered Camille's office with an urgent look. "You need to see this." She handed Camille a tablet. The headline on the Wall Street Journal was unmistakable. "CEO's Personal Priorities. Innovation or Midlife Crisis." The article included anonymous quotes from inside Halcyon. They painted Camille as emotionally compromised, fixated on a single employee and her child, implying that her professional judgment was clouded by unresolved grief. The Family Forward initiative was framed not as a strategic decision, but as a personal indulgence. Camille stared at the screen. This wasn't just criticism. This was war. "Who leaked this?" Camille Barrington asked, her voice quiet but edged with steel. Janet hesitated. "I can't say for certain," she replied, "but the article included personal details about your wife and daughter that only a handful of people would even know existed." Camille's phone began ringing. Then again. Then again. Board members, top clients, industry partners, all demanding answers. By noon, Halcyon's shares had dropped 3 points, and the PR department was already in full crisis mode. Victoria Sloane entered Camille's office wearing a perfectly composed expression, anxious but measured. "The board has called an emergency meeting at 4 o'clock, she said, then paused. "They're also requesting Mariah Davis's presence." "On what grounds?" Cammy asked, her voice darkening. Victoria offered a practiced shrug. "They didn't say. I'm just the messenger." After she left, Camille immediately phoned Mariah. "I've seen the article," Mariah said, her voice tight with fear and fatigue. "Jordan's teacher called. Other parents are talking. It's starting to affect him." The way she said Jordan, using Camille's first name for the first time, was like a knife. "I never intended for any of this," Camille began, but Mariah cut her off. "Intentions don't matter much when my 7-year-old hears other kids whispering that his mom has something going on with her boss." The implication struck Camille harder than any headline. The article never accused either of them outright, but it planted seeds, dangerous, insidious seeds. When they arrived at the meeting, the atmosphere was brittle and cold. Gerald Harrington sat at the center of the long table, flanked by Victoria and a few of the more conservative board members. James Whitfield sat alone across from them, his presence a quiet, visible sign of loyalty. "Let's get to the point," Harrison began. "This morning's article has harmed Halcyon's reputation and damaged shareholder confidence. Our phones have not stopped ringing." Camille kept her face unreadable. "Media speculation isn't new. Our communications team is working to clarify the inaccuracies." Victoria spoke up smoothly. "The concern isn't just about the media, it's about judgment." She turned toward Mariah. "No one questions your qualifications, but the nature of your hiring and the rapid company-wide situation based on your personal situation have caused disruption." Mariah straightened her back. "If my being a single mother or my son showing initiative when I was hospitalized is a threat to this company's image, then I'd like to understand exactly what part is so damaging." Murmurs passed among the board members. Harrington cut in again, pushing a proposal across the table toward Camille. "We suggest a temporary suspension of the Family Forward initiative, pending review and a transfer for Miss Davis to the Cleveland office to eliminate any concerns about impropriety." Camille didn't touch the document. "That would be constructive dismissal, and you know it. Her son's life and school are here. We'll support relocation expenses," Victoria offered blandly. Then Mariah spoke, her voice slicing through the room. "May I ask, who disclosed Miss Barrington's personal family tragedy to the press?" The room froze. Harrington stiffened. "That's not relevant to this meeting." "I disagree," Mariah replied. "Someone used deeply private information as a weapon. If that doesn't concern the ethics of this board, then what does?" James leaned in. "I agree. Before any policy changes are made, we should investigate the breach that triggered this situation." Victoria's pristine composure faltered ever so slightly. "We have no concrete proof that any board member—" "Actually," Camille interrupted, "we do." She nodded to Janet, who stepped forward and handed out printed emails. "This morning, we identified the source." These messages were sent from Victoria Sloane's work account to a Wall Street Journal contact 3 days ago. Every head turned. Victoria's face went pale. "That's impossible," she stammered. "My email must have been hacked. Someone must have accessed my credentials." Camille tilted her head. "That's quite a stretch, considering the files attached required clearance only you have." For the first time during the meeting, Camille allowed herself the faintest smile. "I knew this was coming. Just didn't expect it quite this soon." The metadata in the leaked email confirmed its authenticity and its origin. It had come directly from Victoria Sloane's account. Camille didn't hesitate. "Victoria," she said evenly, "you're terminated. Security will escort you to collect your things." Gasps rippled across the room. Harrington's face flushed crimson. "You can't fire an executive unilaterally without board approval," he snapped. "Actually, I can," Camille replied coolly. "This breach falls under my direct authority as CEO. Unless, of course, you were involved, Gerald." He flinched. Of course not. I would never. Good, Camel interrupted. Then I suggest we adjourn until tomorrow so the board can review the evidence. As board members filtered out, some stunned, others clearly relieved, Rebecca remained seated. You knew this might happen, she said softly. Camille nodded. I suspected Victoria might eventually make a move. She's resisted every change I've proposed for years. Rebecca looked down. Then why didn't you warn me? There was no anger in her voice, just something quieter, hurt. Because reaction matters, Camille answered. If you had prepared for it, someone might have suspected collusion. She paused. I'm sorry about the impact on Jordan. I didn't expect it to escalate this way. Rebecca gathered her notes. He's stronger than you realize, stronger than most adults. Then she stopped at the door, her voice gentler. For what it's worth, I believe in what you're building. A company that doesn't demand people sacrifice their families for a paycheck. It's about time someone did. After she left, Camille stood alone in the silence. The crisis had been contained. The battle had been won. But at what cost? 3 weeks passed. Victoria's firing faded from the headlines. Meridian's stock rebounded. The Family Forward initiative not only survived, it expanded, reaching 25 positions across departments. Mariah's project metrics became a model of productivity and employee satisfaction. Even former critics on the board were coming around, especially as competitors began copying Halcyon's policies. But just as peace seemed possible, Gerald Harrington strode into Camille's office unannounced and shut the door behind him. We need to talk, he said, dropping a thick file on her desk. About your future at Halcyon. Camille raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware my future was in question. Harrington tapped the file. The board has initiated a leadership transition plan, a formal proposal for you to step into an advisory role over the next 6 months. I'll serve as interim CEO during the search. Camille opened the folder slowly. It was all there in black and white. A carefully orchestrated coup masked as strategy. This is about the changes I've made, she said, even though the numbers prove they work. The numbers aren't everything, Harrington replied. You've reshaped the company around your personal journey, and some believe it's gone too far. You've had dinner at an employee's home. You've attended her child's school events. You've turned a personal story into company-wazy policy. I supported a talented employee and saw the potential to expand that support company-weighty, Camille shot back. Any personal connection is secondary. Harrington studied her. Is it? The vote is Friday at 2 p.m. You have until then to accept the transition. Otherwise, things will get messy. And if it comes to that, do you really want Jordan caught in the crossfire again? After he left, Camille sat alone, the proposal still open on her desk. She could fight. She still had support. Her track record spoke for itself. But Harrington was right about one thing. An all-out war would drag Mariah and Jordan back into the spotlight, and that, more than anything, was what she wanted to avoid. As if summoned by thought, a soft knock broke the silence. Jordan peeked his head in, holding a blue ribbon. Miss Barrington, I wanted to show you my science fair results. I won first place! For the next 15 minutes, Camille listened as he explained the chemistry behind his erupting volcano model, his eyes glowing with pride. The corporate drama faded into the background, replaced by the quiet joy of a child being heard. When he finally paused, she looked at him. Jordan, she asked gently, what would you think if I stopped working at Halcyon? His smile faltered. Are you joining another company? Maybe, she said honestly. Or maybe I'll start something new. Jordan considered it, then asked, Will we still see you? He paused. Mom said you were my mentor, but I thought you were our friend too. That simple sentence made something fall into place inside her. The corner office, the power, the title. It all suddenly seemed smaller than the bond she'd built with a brave boy and his extraordinary mother. Camille smiled. Yes, she said firmly. We'll still see each other, I promise. That night, Reynolds called Rebecca. I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet tomorrow? Is this about Harrington's ultimatum? She asked, surprising him with her intuition. How did you know? The executive floor has thin walls, she said, and Janet keeps me informed. She's rather protective of you. Reynolds smiled, even though he didn't want to. Apparently, I'm the last to know about the coup. It's not a coup yet, Rebecca corrected. Just an attempt. For now. She paused. Alexander, whatever you're planning, please don't make this about protecting me or Jordan. We've survived corporate politics before. It's not just about protecting you, he admitted. It's about asking myself what matters more, the company I've built or the future I want to build. The silence that followed held both tension and possibility. Come to dinner tomorrow, Rebecca finally said. Jordan's making his famous spaghetti. We can talk after he's asleep. When Reynolds hung up, he realized something. For the first time since Caroline and Lily died, he was making decisions not out of grief, but out of hope. Whatever happened to Meridian, something inside him had already shifted. He was no longer looking backward. He was beginning to look forward. But he couldn't have predicted what the next day would bring. A truth that would change everything. At 10:37 IMM, a manila envelope arrived via courier. It was marked, Private and Confidential, for Alexander Reynolds. Janet placed it on his desk, curious but silent. One of the many reasons he valued her discretion. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Personnel records, private board meeting minutes, internal emails, all from Gerald Harrington's tenure. A small note was paperclipped to the top. It read simply, You deserve to know what you're really up against. A friend. As Reynolds flipped through the papers, his hands began to tremble. The memos outlined a deliberate policy, crafted during Harrington's leadership, to quietly push out women of childbearing age. One note from Harrington to HR read, We can't openly discriminate, but we can engineer performance metrics that punish those with family obligations. That'll keep the workforce sharp and distraction-free. Another page listed female employees who became pregnant while working at Meridian. Next to each name were notes tracking their leave and whether they returned within 18 months. It was a pattern. Intentional, systematic, undeniable. Then he saw it. Caroline's name. A board presentation slide from 20 years ago. The wife of CFO Alexander Reynolds has requested to return part-time post-maternity leave. The recommendation beside it read, Deny sets dangerous precedent for executive spouses. Reynolds sank into his chair. The memories returned like a flood. Caroline's frustration after Lily was born. Her endless rejections from firms who called her too flexible. Her fights when he told her to just stay home, like the other executive wives. The final document was a newspaper clipping about the car crash that killed Caroline and Lily. In Harrington's handwriting, scrawled in the corner. Tragic ending. Make sure AR stays focused on work. Pain is the best motivator. Rage and grief swirled together in Reynolds' chest. All these years, he had blamed himself for not being there for Caroline. But he had never imagined that his mentor had engineered her rejection. When Rebecca called to confirm dinner plans, she heard something different in his voice. Alexander, what's wrong? I need to show you something, he said. Can you meet me at the office first? It's important. An hour later, she sat across from him. Dozens of documents lay open between them. She picked one up. This is systemic discrimination, he said. Policies specifically designed to push working mothers out, while still maintaining legal deniability. Rebecca scanned the pages. Her calm, practiced exterior cracked. Anger took its place. And Harrington, he's behind this? Not just behind it, Reynolds said. And created it, he enforced it, and apparently, he was proud of how well it worked. He looked her in the eyes. And it did this to my wife, Caroline. Something shifted in Rebecca's expression. Now she understood why this was more than policy. This was personal. This is about redemption. Reynolds admitted quietly. Correcting a mistake I didn't even know existed until today. Rebecca reached across the desk and gently took his hand. It was the first time she initiated any physical contact between them. Alexander, this changes everything. The board needs to see this, she said. Harrington has allies, Reynolds warned. They'll say it's outdated, they'll downplay it, they'll bury it. Then we don't just show the board, Rebecca said firmly. We show everyone. What do you mean? Transparency, she replied. We release a full report to the public. We admit what happened, we document what we're doing to fix it. Reynolds blinked. That would be unprecedented. Exactly, she nodded. No company has had the courage to publicly own its failure. We do this right, and Meridian becomes the symbol of transformation, not perfection. Progress. As they strategized late into the afternoon, Reynolds realized something. He wasn't just admiring her as a project manager. He was admiring her moral clarity. Like she wasn't reacting as a victim. She was thinking like a visionary. These documents, Reynolds said, don't just change how we handle Friday's board meeting. It will change how I see the past 17 years of my life. Rebecca looked at him gently. And what will you do with that clarity? I don't know yet, he admitted. But for the first time, I think I'm finally walking the path Caroline would have wanted. That night, in Rebecca's kitchen, Jordan proudly served his spaghetti. Along with garlic bread he helped toast. The cozy domesticity of it all stunned Reynolds. This was the life he'd lost. This was the part he had pushed away for years. Later, after Jordan went to bed, Rebecca poured 2 glasses of wine. They sat on the small balcony overlooking a quiet city park. Tomorrow will be hard, she said softly. Harrington won't give up without a fight. I'm ready for that, Reynolds said. What I'm not ready for is what comes next. She turned to him. What do you mean? For 17 years I defined myself by what I lost, and by what I built to outrun that loss. Meridian became my identity, Reynolds said, voice low, because I had nothing else. He paused, then looked over toward Rebecca. But these past few months, being part of your lives, spending time with Jordan, I started to remember that there are other ways to measure success. Rebecca's posture softened, though her voice was cautious. Alexander, no matter what happens at Meridian, you've made a real difference. What you built, it matters. It'll help countless families. He nodded. Yes, but maybe what matters more is being present. For the people right in front of me. He let the silence linger. It's not just about building systems to help strangers down the road. It's about showing up now for the people who actually care. The meaning in his words hung in the air between them, thick with emotion but left unsaid. We should focus on tomorrow's battle first, Rebecca finally said, though her eyes held questions that reached far beyond corporate agendas. Reynolds simply nodded, respecting her pace. As he stood to leave, Jordan padded into the hallway in his pajamas, clutching a glass of water, a thin excuse, clearly more curious about the grown-up conversation. Mr. Reynolds, he said with sweet sincerity, are you going to be okay? You look kinda worried. Reynolds crouched to meet him, eye to eye. I am a little worried about tomorrow's meeting, he admitted, but having you and your mom in my corner makes me braver. Jordan took that in, nodding solemnly before offering, Mom says big worries always look smaller in the morning. The wisdom of it made Reynolds smile. Your mom's a smart woman. I know, Jordan grinned proudly. Then he added, almost casually, she laughs more when you're around, you know. Rebecca gave a small, embarrassed smile as she gently steered her son back toward bed. And in that moment, Reynolds understood something deeply true. No matter what happened at the board meeting the next day, the most important transformation had already occurred, not in Meridian's policies, but in himself. The man who would walk into that boardroom tomorrow was no longer the same executive who once built walls to keep grief out. The Meridian boardroom was hushed. Alexander Reynolds stood at the head of the table, finishing his presentation. In front of each board member sat proof, decades of documents, systematic and damning, exposing Gerald Harrington's exclusionary policies. "For 17 years," Reynolds said, voice steady but thick with restrained emotion, "I believed I failed Caroline by losing myself in building this company. But today, I've learned the failure wasn't just mine. It was institutional. This wasn't neglect. It was designed." He held up another file. This policy, crafted by Mr. Harrington, was intended to quietly eliminate working mothers from Meridian's workforce. Harrington went pale as document after document was laid bare. "Those were different times," he muttered weakly. "Outdated practices." Rebecca stepped beside Reynolds. "Or," she said sharply, "did you simply make sure they never changed?" She passed around a new set of documents, charts, statistics, real-world results. "This," she said, "is what happened when we supported working parents. Productivity didn't drop. It soared." James Whitfield cleared his throat. "I move that we formally adopt the Family Forward Initiative as permanent company policy and expand it across every Meridian office." "I second," said Martina Chen, usually quiet, but now resolute. "And I move for the immediate removal of Gerald Harrington from this board." Harrington stood, sputtering. "This is absurd. I built this company." "And you did it," Reynolds said evenly, "by locking people out." He met Harrington's eyes. "But times have changed. We've changed." The vote was called, 11-3 in favor of the initiative and Harrington's removal. As security escorted the former executive from the building, Reynolds felt something lift. Not just a professional threat, but a personal burden he had carried since Caroline and Lily died. Later that afternoon, as news of Meridian's bold new policy broke in the financial press, Reynolds sat alone in his office, staring at a photo of his late wife and daughter. For the first time in 17 years he spoke to them without guilt. "I think you'd approve," he said quietly. "Informal. It took me too long. But maybe losing me brought something good." A knock on the door pulled him back. Rebecca stood there, Jordan beside her. "We brought cupcakes to celebrate," Jordan grinned, holding up a bakery box. "Mom says I helped win a big battle." Reynolds chuckled. "We won it together." As Jordan arranged cupcakes on the conference table with careful seriousness, Rebecca walked over to the window beside Reynolds. "What now?" she asked softly. "Professionally," he said, "we roll this out nationwide. 3 competing firms already called asking for guidance." He turned to face her more fully. "Often what they mean is, but personally, that's a harder question." "Is it?" she asked gently. Reynolds took a deep breath. "For 17 years I've lived in the past, built Meridian as a monument to what I lost, instead of laying the foundation for what's next." He looked over at Jordan, now carefully folding napkins. "You and Jordan remind me that life goes on, that maybe there is a second chance, if we're brave enough to take it." Rebecca looked at him. "Are you brave enough?" Reynolds reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. This belonged to Caroline. She always said it should go to someone who believed in what she did. Rebecca unwrapped it gently. Inside was a silver bracelet with a single charm, a compass. "She used to say women need to have their own direction," Reynolds explained, "not someone else's." Rebecca touched the charm with reverence. Just then, Jordan popped his head up. "Are you guys having a serious talk? You look serious." Reynolds knelt down again. "We were talking serious. I was actually wondering if you and your mom would help me with a new project." Jordan lit up. "Like the kit space we designed?" "Even bigger," Reynolds smiled. "I want to start a fund, one that helps companies build better workplaces for families. We'll need a director of kid audits, someone who knows what really works for kids." "I can do that," Jordan beamed. "I thought you could," Reynolds said proudly, then looked up at Rebecca. "And we'll need a brilliant executive, someone who understands business and the heart of a family." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "For the first time in 17 years, Reynolds said, "Yes, I'm serious." The Reynolds Family Foundation, Alexander announced with quiet conviction. Our mission is simple: transform workplace culture across the country, one company at a time. Jordan's eyes lit up with curiosity. The Reynolds Family Foundation? He repeated slowly. Does that mean we're part of your family now? The question hung there, innocent, but echoing with meaning far deeper than a 7-year-old could grasp. Rebecca flushed, gently opening her mouth to respond. But Reynolds spoke first. Not yet, he said softly, surprising even himself with the honesty in his voice. But sometimes families are built in more ways than one, and over time they find their shape. 1 year later, almost to the day, the foundation held its inaugural event in the very same lobby where Jordan once stood holding his mother's worn portfolio. Just a little boy with big questions. Now, that same space was filled with hundreds of business leaders, executives, and HR directors gathered to learn how to implement bold, family-workplace policies. Change was no longer a concept, it had become a movement. Reynolds stood at the podium, calm and proud. Rebecca stood beside him, now CEO of the foundation, and in the crowd, Jordan handed out program flyers with a bright grin and an even brighter future. Unexpected guest," Reynolds began, addressing the crowd, "changed everything." He smiled as he looked down at Jordan. A 7-year-old boy reminded a roomful of adults what real courage looks like. Jordan, now standing between Rebecca and Reynolds, beamed. "He reminded us that family is never a burden in the workplace," Reynolds continued. "Family is our greatest asset, and ultimately it's the reason we work in the first place." Applause erupted around the room. As it swelled, Reynolds reached for Rebecca's hand. The silver compass bracelet glinted gently as their fingers laced together. On her other hand sat a golden ring, newly worn, newly given, matching the one on his. "Ready for this next adventure?" he asked quietly, leaning close. Rebecca smiled, resting her head on his shoulder as Jordan threw his arms around both of them with the joyful clumsiness only a child can bring. "We were ready," she whispered, "from the moment you walked into that lobby." Sometimes the most life-changing meetings arrive disguised as interruptions. Sometimes the best opportunities show up in the form of unexpected questions. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's the quiet courage of a child that heals the wounds we thought would last forever. As the final applause faded and the last guest departed, the lights of the conference hall dimmed, casting a warm golden glow across the empty lobby where it had all begun. Rebecca gathered the leftover brochures with one hand, while Jordan danced circles around the foundation banner, his laughter echoing through the vast glass atrium. Reynolds stood quietly by the window, watching the boy's joy like a man rediscovering sunlight after a long winter. Outside, evening settled over the city, soft and certain. Inside, something had shifted. Not just in policy, not merely in position, but in the hearts of those who dared to believe that workplaces could become places of compassion, not just profit. What started with a simple conversation between a mother and a CEO had grown into a national movement. But more than that, it had restored something deeply human. The belief that change is possible, not just through revolutions, but through relationships, through the courage to care when it's easier not to, and the resolve to do what's right even when it's inconvenient. Reynolds used to think leadership was about vision, about strategy, about execution, and while those things still mattered, he had come to understand that real leadership is also about listening. Listening to the quiet voices, to the overlooked workers balancing diapers and deadlines, to the children waiting at home for a parent too exhausted to laugh. In many ways, Jordan had become the symbol of that shift. A boy whose simple honesty cut through boardroom egos and reminded them all what mattered most. Not titles, not press releases, not shareholders, but people, lives, futures. And that's the lesson Meridian and Alexander Reynolds had to learn the hard way. That progress isn't just measured in numbers, but in moments, in second chances given, in barriers broken, in a workplace where a child's science fair ribbon holds as much value as a quarterly profit report. The Reynolds Family Foundation didn't just change companies, it challenged them to remember their humanity. In a world often driven by ambition, this story asks us to pause, to question, to reflect. What are we building, and at what cost? If a child's innocence can awaken the conscience of an entire institution, then perhaps there's hope for all of us. Hope that kindness still has power, that empathy is not weakness, that the future belongs to those who build with both wisdom and heart. So when Jordan looked up at the stage that evening, his mother glowing with quiet strength, Reynolds smiling with hard-earned peace, he wasn't just seeing two adults who had changed the world. He was seeing the world they made possible. And in that world, family wasn't a liability, it was the legacy.